Morning, everyone. It's Matthew here in London, and I'm just reading the newspaper and absolutely gobsmacked at how much private equity has expanded and taken basically from the people over the last few years. There's some pretty good charts and reporting by the Financial Times. It's flicked out on the front page, but if you look here at this story, it's another demonstration of why the UK political leadership is failing to regulate properly capitalism so it works for the people, not the people in these financial institutions, these hedge funds, these private equity firms who are simply taking too much out of the economy. It's not a fair share for the value that they add. I'm not saying that they don't add value. Often these private equity deals do streamline companies and make them better and can even make them greener. But check out this chart. I mean, you can see here that during the global financial crisis, this was a big deal. Utility companies, for example, and just the last couple of years, utility companies, these private equity deals effectively, they buy companies to sell them, to deliberately sell them, and they streamline them or take costs out, but that often involves putting prices up to consumers. And so while our political leaders are blaming wages for the price increases, this here is why inflation has been so rampant. And you can see it's not just utility and energy companies, but a bunch of different companies that have increased their prices: healthcare, professional services, leisure, food and drink, auto companies. Using a car in this country has become super expensive. Owning a car. Here is a chart on the profits being extracted by these people. There are like 20% fees. You count it up, 5 billion, another 3. That adds up to, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 billion in just a few years in pure profit. That has to come back to the consumers of the country, ultimately. Here are the guys doing it. And the link to the leadership is clear. You can see here, Blackstone, the world's largest alternatives investor by assets and under management, has been the most active, including through its real estate arm. The group's senior European private equity executive, Lionel Assant, and its recently knighted founder, knighted for doing this sort of stuff to the people, is that right? Have a close relationship with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. And now the people favoured to win in an election in a couple of days' time, are they going to help with this? Are they going to fix it for the people so it works for the people, not just these guys taking all of this money for doing questionable stuff to the people? There are also signs that Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves would soften the blow of increasing the tax on these profits. She suggested last month that buyout executives who invest in their own funds would continue to enjoy favourable tax treatment. Wow. So the people who are going to win office potentially Thursday are really wanting to protect this industry, this private equity industry, rather than the people who are voting on Thursday. The Financial Times has framed this all wrong. I know the Financial Times is read by the richest people in the UK, but to frame it as a big loss if these private equity folks move to other countries and stop doing it to the UK people, if that's a really bad thing, I think the Financial Times editors have just lost the plot. Going forward, it's not clear at all that these firms can replicate the lucrative past 2 decades. Oh, wow, can't they? Well, that would be good, wouldn't it? I mean, it's further clear evidence that the UK has been captured completely by the US. Now, I've done a story a few days ago on this. This is why we need more independents such as myself in the UK Parliament. US corporations are making about £23,000 per household per year after taking over Britain, is the headline I used. I don't know how many people know this, but it's an incredible amount of money. And you can see that they're effectively using Britain as the US's 51st state. They're doing a test run on us to see how much they can get away with, I reckon. So they make $23,000 per household per year, and that demonstrates one of the world's oldest democracies is now pretty much captured by an external economic power. It's not Russia and China we have to worry about. It's the US and this reckless capitalism. Here's a podcast I recommend, okay? And it's with this author who's come up with that 23,000 number, Novara Media. Check that out. But just for comparison and for a bit of context, have a look at that 23,000 in the context of income. So it's flabbergasting to me that household income is only about, I think, 32,000. So the context here is that US corporations are getting 2/3 of household income. I know they're not directly comparable, but the average household income in the UK for the financial year ending 2023 was approximately 34,000 before household costs. So you can see how that puts into context the 23,000. And just finally, a word on this reckless capitalism and what it's doing around the world. This is from the Financial Times on the weekend. But just check out this, what's happening to nature, what's happening to people, real people across the world as this rampant capitalism is normalized by the mainstream media. The FT today is encouraging people to vote Labour, which Labour should be better than the Tories, there's no doubt about it. But they're not being ambitious enough for the people, in my opinion. Look at this. Prolonged June heat wave has widespread effect. India is experiencing its longest heat wave on record, with most days exceeding 35 degrees and many 40 degrees Celsius. Imagine living that every day, probably without air conditioning. Imagine it. It's almost like the rich world is scorching all of these countries here. Northern Africa, the Middle East, India. 1,300 people died during the Hajj pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia on June 14 to 19. It's completely shocking. It's completely shocking. It's completely unacceptable. And that's why when you're voting on Thursday, don't just think about what narrative, the narratives, the immigration narratives, the racism narratives, the gambling narratives. The Tories have put that out there to distract you from what's going on. Be under no illusions. If you keep voting the same way, you'll get the same outcome. Vote independent on Thursday, or Lib Dems, someone different, not the Tories and not Labour. Thanks for listening. Cheers.